Alright, I'm going to start off my video today with an introduction to the video. So the video has its own introduction, but as I was making this, it's about Docker and about some of the benefits of Docker, but I wanted to address something that's happened recently, which is the folks from Docker.io, which is not to be confused with the open source Docker project. These are the people who initially made the Docker project. But the Docker Hub folks sent out a message saying, hey, if your open source team does not meet these requirements, then we are going to remove your team and remove your images from our repositories. You have to be able to meet these requirements in order to be considered open source, or start paying us to use our space, which in and of itself is not terrible, but the way that they announced it wasn't great. The way that they're kind of acting as far as what open source is, in my opinion, is also not great. They're trying to kind of fit a really tight definition of what they call open source around it. I don't think it's quite right. Again, this is just my opinion, so you guys are free to read about it and come up with your own opinions, but I didn't want to put this video out there and then you guys come back and tell me, hey, those guys have just gone and done a bunch of terrible stuff. Like, I am aware of what's going on. I still say that Docker, the open source project, is an incredible project. And there's other options. If you want to use Podman, it's an awesome project. It's kind of a spin-off of Docker that Red Hat went and made on their own. There's Kubernetes, which started off as kind of a way to run Docker things in clusters, and then it's kind of branched off to be its own thing as well. There's LXC containers. You can check out Scottabai's channel if you want to see more about that stuff. I mean, he does LXD all the time. He covers how to do it, run under the bare metal, and really that links in a lot to what I'm going to be covering in this video. But I wanted to cover this just a little bit because I get it. I'm the open source advocate. I advocate for open source products, and I advocate for open source tools to all of you guys, and I advocate for you guys to run those things in something like Docker because it makes it so easy to be on the uptake of it, and it makes it so easy to get it started and get it running. And I wanted to talk about a lot of the things that I get in my comments today, so you'll see that in the video when it comes up. I hope you'll stick around and just really enjoy this video. I made it to kind of answer some of those questions as a response to a lot of those comments that I get over time. It's not aimed at any one person. It's not aimed at any one commenter. I 100% understand your concerns about Docker if you have them, and I wanted to address those, so that's what this video is about. I didn't want this to turn into a video about Docker Hub or Docker.io. I just want it to be a video about the tool that's open source called Docker that we can use to make our open source lives better, our self-hosting easier, and just so much more great stuff that comes out of a tool like that. Maybe at some point I'm going to switch over to Podman. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future, but I just wanted to address this real quick. So without further ado, here is the video. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I hate Docker. So yes, I'm probably baiting you into this video a little bit because anybody who's watched any of my videos in the past knows that I absolutely love Docker. But I understand this person's perspective. It is frustrating to try and learn Docker in the beginning. It is frustrating to try and understand what's going on. I remember when I heard about Docker almost 10 years ago, I think it was 2014, 2015 time, I didn't get it. I really just didn't even understand what it was supposed to be. I was watching a podcast, which, a lot of podcasts do video versions. This one actually was. I think it was on Linux Unplugged, or it was on Linux Action Show is what it was called at the time. I can't remember which, but they were talking about Docker and how cool it was and everything. And they were showing a little bit of what was going on with it. And I really I didn't get it. I didn't understand what the heck it was for. They kept talking about running applications. And I kept thinking, okay, well, how do I get this Docker thing and how do I make it run something? And I just really, truly did not understand. When I looked up Docker, I didn't get it. I saw these text files. It just made me go, why would I want this? They have application stores now that work fine. So I understand this person's just complete hatred of Docker. They hate it. They hate the networking with it, but they also hate Hyper-V, which is a virtualization thing. They've spent time trying to deal with problem after problem. And again, I understand where they're coming from. When I started this channel, my first few videos, if you go watch them, I did not use Docker unless it said use Docker, and then I just followed their instructions. I didn't really have any idea what was happening or why it was a Docker thing. As I got more and more into the videos and I found more and more people were using Docker to push out their applications, I had to start looking into it. It was kind of me being forced into it a little bit to help educate myself, because my goal is to educate you guys. I understand that you hate Docker. I understand that you might dislike the way it works, and I've got plenty of people who put comments on my different videos saying, you know, why did they do it in Docker? Why didn't they just show us how to install this thing straight up on the metal or in an actual virtual machine? I hate Docker. I can't see what's going on inside of it. I don't really grasp, why people like this so much. And I totally, again, I really do understand where you're coming from. And I think a lot of that is just about not understanding Docker and wanting to be the person who understands what's happening with your applications. If you're an IT administrator, not really knowing what's going on under the covers can be nerve-wracking, because you're the person that's responsible for making sure that everything is running. You're the person that's responsible for making sure that the business is running. You're the person that's responsible when everything stops working, your family comes running to you going, hey, I can't access this, or I can't access that, or the internet quit, or whatever, because your Pi hole stopped working. So I 100% get where you're coming from, and I want to talk a little bit about how that can make you feel today. I want to make sure that you see some tools. I found some really great tools over the years. I'll link to those in the show notes and descriptions that can help you see more of what's going on in Docker. And I'm going to show you a new tool today as well. We're going to get it installed and kind of look through it. So stick with me. It's going to be really great. And we're going to get into it right after this. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really, truly enjoy it. And I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So when you start talking about Docker and you say, you just say to yourself, what is Docker? The first thing you're going to do is look up Docker on the internet. And of course, you're going to be brought at some point to docker.com. And this doesn't really help you. Develop faster. The biggest words you see here are develop faster. It doesn't say be better with your IT. Make applications run easier in your IT infrastructure. It says develop faster. So you're thinking, well, this is a tool for developers. Why would I want this? Why would I want to do this? And really, it's not. It's a shame that this is the way that they push Docker, in my opinion. I think it's great because it does help you do development faster and push out applications faster and get people to do the upgrades faster, because it is truly easier. But there's also run anywhere. This, to me, should be the first thing that they put. This should be about the fourth bullet point, in my opinion. Develop faster should be the fourth bullet point. Run anywhere should be the first bold bullet point, and really making people understand, like, this is really and truly an awesome way to be able to run things. If you like to run things on Windows, you can run it on Windows. If you're a Mac person and you have a Mac and you want to run stuff on Mac, you can run Docker on Mac. If you're like me and about 99% of the rest of the world on servers, maybe you use Linux, and that's great because Linux 100% does Docker. It is awesome, and it makes it so much easier to get things deployed and going. Now, understanding what those Docker commands mean, understanding what a Docker Compose file is saying, understanding how to build your own Docker container is a whole different story. So, again, Docker makes development efficient and predictable. I think this is a great story, but to me, for the vast majority of people coming to their site, I don't know if this talks to somebody new who says, I want to understand Docker. And then you see build. You're like, well, if I have to build it, why do I want to use Docker? Share. Share makes sense to me. So, like, how do I get my family to use the things that I want to run? How do I run this with more ease? Great. But again, you've got these development topics at the top that somebody's going to stop scrolling before they ever get to these things and go, well, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I'm thinking. I don't want to use it. New to containers. This should be way up at the top to me. Like, tell me, like, what is Docker somewhere? This is such a hodgepodge of weirdness for me as a person who says I want to learn about Docker, because I did exactly this. I came here and I saw the develop stuff, and I saw all these things, and I saw make development more efficient, build, and I was just like, this isn't what I'm looking for. And I went off and I started looking at other places for more information. Maybe that's how you found my channel, and if you did, that's great. I'm glad you're here. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button since you're here. I've got tons and tons and tons of videos at this point, over 200 videos on how to run your own open source self-hosted software, and I do most of it in Docker, but I really try to explain to you what's happening with that Docker container. So as we're looking at Docker, I have this application that I've been building and that I built for my family because all of the food lists and things that were out there were just, to me, not great. I don't know. I've tried a bunch of lists, but I just made one that my family can use. They have logins, they can get in it, they can use it, and they can put new things on the list, and I can see who did it, and I can see what they're asking for, and I can put things, I can see which kid put what on the list and take it off if it's ridiculous or something they don't need. It's really, a thing for me to kind of control what we're buying at the stores, especially with prices going through the roof lately. So I said, okay, let me build this out in Docker, and I've done this before, but what you use in Docker is what they call a Docker file. So you build your Docker container using a Docker file, and this is kind of like just a long script that tells Docker, here's everything you need to go get and install and make right in order for my application to run. So if you're one of those IT folks who says, you know what, I don't know what this thing's doing, I don't understand how to install it on the bare metal, and I want to understand what's happening, this is your place to start. This thing called Dockerfile, which is in most repos of any software you'll see that has Docker, they'll have a Docker file either on Docker Hub or on their GitHub repo. You might have to look around a little bit, but there's usually one somewhere where you can look at it. And when you open this thing up, so I created this Docker file to run this application, and this is really and truly exactly how these things work. So when you say from, this is the base that I'm using for it. Now, I want to switch this to Alpine because Alpine is much smaller and lighter, but right now I'm familiar with Ubuntu. It makes it easier for me to do the things I need to do to get this running, but eventually I want to switch to Alpine. So I'm saying start with a Ubuntu 2204 base. Now, this is not the entire Ubuntu like you would download from their website that's like 2 gigs. This is a really small minimized version of Ubuntu 2204. It's only got the absolute most necessary things in it to run a Ubuntu base. The next thing is make a directory and call it user source getmy. That's all it is. So usr source getmy. Then it says remove bin sh and then link bin bash as bin sh. So if I use a terminal, if I use commands in this Docker file, use bash instead of sh. That's all it is. Then every time it says run, it's going to run this like a command in the terminal. So it's going to run apt-get update. It's going to update my Ubuntu base. It's going to install curl and wget, something that I need in order for this to run. And then it's going to do a real quick auto clean just to get all the extra crap out that I don't need. Then I'm setting up some environment variables. So the NVM directory is user local NVM. And then the node version that I'm looking for is 14.19.3 for the specific application. As I update the application development language, I need to come in and update this, but I just tell it here's the new node version I need, and it keeps working. So the next thing I do is I curl, and I go out there and I grab the stuff that I need for NVM, which is awesome. And then I say, use the NVM directory, run nvm.sh, and then install the version that I set up here. So this is just running a script real quick, a command that's concatenated with ampersands, that's all. It comes on down and it sets up the node path, it sets up path, a few variables that I need as I go through this thing. I check the node version, I check the npm version. This is just output for me to make sure that it got what it needed when I'm running the build. It's nothing that has to be there. I do a 6-second sleep because it gives me time to look at these versions real quick. That's it. And then I say apt-get install g++, build essential, Python 3. These are things that I need in order for my application to actually build. Then I set the working directory, user/src/getmy or usr/source/getmy. And then I set up my MongoDB URL because Mongo is going to run inside of this container with everything else. It's not something that I need to be accessible by any other applications. This is strictly for this application. So I set up Mongo. I copy the bundle. I'm going to copy it to this local working directory that I set up. So I'm just going to copy this bundle over there. I'm going to move into that working directory in a couple of levels later, and I'm going to run my npm install, which the node package manager is then going to go grab all of the stuff that this application needs. It's going to get everything ready. I'm going to expose port 3000. That's where the node application runs, and then I can map this port in my Docker Compose file. And then I'm going to run node main.js. That's really it. This is just a script to say, here's how you run this thing. So this is the thing that's happening. So if you wanted to go say, I want to run this manually, you could run through all these steps on a fresh Docker install, make sure you've got everything, and then run the node at main.js. Instead of having a set of quotes and a comma, you just have node space main.js. And the application should come up. It is really straightforward to look at a Docker file and kind of think, okay, what are they doing? Okay, I see what they're doing. I see what they're doing. And then bam, run this thing. This is what creates that Docker image. It's really, really, if you're one of those people that says, I want to know what's happening, how's this thing being built, what's going on, you could probably follow this and build it in your own system outside of the container. So if you're ever looking for that, definitely look for those Docker files. It's super useful. It's really going to help you understand what's happening. Now, the next thing I want to talk about when we talk about Docker and understanding what's happening inside of Docker are tools that you can use to see what's going on in Docker. I've heard people say, I don't like Docker because I can't jump in and troubleshoot it. It's just a black box. And that's not exactly true. Docker is like a virtual machine. It's a special kind of virtual machine where the application and everything that you just saw is running in what they call a container. So it's like a container on a container ship. And each application is in its own container, and sometimes those containers can talk and sometimes they can't. And if you don't allow them to talk to other containers, then it won't happen. If you don't allow them to talk to the host system, it won't happen. So that's some of the things that you're setting up in those Docker run commands or those Docker compose files, is letting things talk to that container in the way that you want. That's that networking that person was talking about. You have to kind of think of the host system as your main office space, and each Docker container as a separate application running on a separate server in your office, and you're going in to set up the rules in your network to say this server can talk to this server, but this server can't talk to those guys. These servers can talk to this server, but those other servers can't talk to those guys. The whole office can see these servers, but this server over here is special and nobody can see it. It's really, that's what you're doing. You're just going into Docker to kind of set that up. Yeah, it's not exactly as simple as that, but that's essentially what you're doing. It really makes it very straightforward to get things set up and run them on a single host inside of Docker, which is kind of cool when you really stop to think about it. Now, Docker in itself, there's this great program here that we're going to look at today. I've never used this before, but it's called LazyDocker. This is a terminal command line program, so it's really perfect for getting in and seeing what's going on inside of Docker. You can get into Docker containers. There's special commands that you run that put you in the terminal inside of that container, and then you use your normal bash scripting shell to move around and do things and look at stuff and see what's happening. The one thing about Docker that you have to remember is that unless you map a special volume to your host system, if you update, any changes you made are going to be gone. So if that volume is not mapped, it's going to be gone. It won't keep it. So we're going to look at LazyDocker. This is really a cool looking application. I want you guys to kind of see it and understand it. This is out here on Docker Hub. I'm going to go back to their Git repo. So this is kind of what it looks like. And if you look here, he's jumping through these different sections in the CLI. And then over here, he's got these tabs that he can jump through to see different things. So you can see graphs, you can see logs, you can see all the kind of stuff that's happening. And he even gets the Docker Compose to come up, the Compose config, which is pretty impressive and pretty neat. So this is really awesome. And we're going to install this right now. We're going to talk about where you can run it. So you can run this thing anywhere. These are all the people that sponsor this thing, which is great. Thank you to every single person on here for being a sponsor. I think that's awesome. Whether you're somebody who's doing code, whether you're somebody who's paying to help this thing keep going, man, you guys are rock stars. I appreciate you supporting open source. That's awesome. They've got a cool section called the elevator pitch that explains, like, why would I want something like LazyDocker? I like it. And then you can get down here to the other information. They've got installation, usage, key bindings, cool features, all kinds of stuff. So you can definitely go in and really dig deep. They have a video tutorial already, so I'm just kind of giving you a nice quick, here's how you do it. I'm going to click on installation. We're going to jump down to that section. If you look here, they've got Homebrew. So for Mac, if you use a Mac, Brew lets you install things and run it on Mac. It's pretty awesome. If you're a Windows user, they've got two different ways. They've got Scooped and they've got Chocolatey, or Scoop and Chocolatey for Windows. So you can kind of get in there and get those things going, and it tells you just first you need to set up scoop on Windows, whatever this is. It's probably something like Homebrew or any of those. And you do scoop install LazyDocker. If you run Chocolatey on Windows, Chocolatey or Choc install LazyDocker. Pretty simple, straightforward to get that done. Now getting Chocolatey and scoop installed, I don't know. I'm not a Windows user, but it looks pretty straightforward. I don't know what ASDF VM is, but here you go. There's some information for that as well. But as we get down, they have binary releases as well for Linux, OS X, and Windows. So what they've got is this curl command that goes out and grabs this script, and you pull that script down and it runs it. Now they warn you like, hey, don't forget before you run just a script, go see what that script looks like. Don't just trust people to not mess with your stuff. So I've opened up that script here, and it goes bin bash, which it just sets up the bash command for the script. And the first thing it does is find out or set up this directory as home, local, and bin. And then it goes through and says, okay, what version of Linux are we using here? This is the thing we need to know. Get some arguments about what your architecture is. Is it ARM or is it x86 or 64-bit? Get the latest GitHub version. So you're going to go through and get all this stuff. It's going to pull that down from GitHub. It's going to come down here and do a curl-l-o lazydocker.tar.gz from the GitHub URL. So it's going to pull the LazyDocker stuff down from GitHub, and it's going to put it in a file called lazydocker.tar.gz. It's going to open up, expand that file into a folder called LazyDocker. It's going to run the install command, and it's going to give it permission 755. LazyDocker-t into the $ directory that you set up there above. And then it's going to remove this folder that it used to get everything expanded. And it's going to remove that zip file for you, so it even does some cleanup, which is really nice. So it looks like a pretty great, straightforward command that's not too hard to run. So we're going to jump back over here. I'm going to copy this thing. I'm going to open up my terminal, and I'm going to go open up one of my systems here. If you're wondering, this is the Tabby terminal. I've got a video on it. A lot of people ask me what's that terminal that I used. So I'm going to expand that, and we'll go open this up. And this just saves all my different systems, and I've got keys set up so it logs right in. It's very easy. And you can even save scripts and commands and things and create shortcuts for those in here and run them. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger font for you guys. We'll clear it out, and we're just going to paste in this command right here. Yes. So it's going to run that thing that we just did. So I'm going to do curl. It's going to run this bash command, and it's done. I mean, it took no time. I did not fast forward the video. I did not pause the video. That was it. It's done. So now we should be able to do LazyDocker. There we go. It's going to start up. Now I've got the font really, really big, so I'm going to make this smaller again because I want you guys to see these sections that it creates for LazyDocker. Maybe not quite that small. There we go. That should work. Okay. So first thing to notice is where we are in this user interface. So it tells us what we're looking at. So this is me. This is the person that owns this. Then we've got these different Docker containers. So this is my Crater. This is where I run Crater, the invoicing software. I've got Code Server. We've got, let's see, we've got the iSpy agent. We've got Jacket, Jellyfin, Molvad OpenVPN client, Portainer agent, Qubit torrent, QuantUX backend and frontend, which is a really cool application called QuantUX, and I just maintain the Docker image for it, as a matter of fact. So I create it and I push it up to GitHub so other people can get it. Here's the Mongo database for that. Sonar, Vault Warden. So we've got a lot of stuff running. So here's Vault Warden. So the first thing you see is these different logs from these different applications. So if you look at Sonar, there's my logs. If you look at any of these others, if the logs pop up, you've got logs that you can check out. So I really like this. It's pretty great. Now, if we're looking at Vault Warden, we're going to go and we're going to use the open square brackets left and right, and that lets you move around. So they've got some different shortcuts down here, but you can also see some other key bindings as well. So they've got an X. If you hit X, it'll give you the menu, and it tells you here's the shortcuts for moving around in here. So you can attach to an actual container, and it'll put you into the system so that you can use it. You can do an exec shell. So this is actually how you get in and do things inside of the container, like all your bash commands and stuff. You can use the E command. So we'll try that here in just a minute. You can view the logs with M. You can restart the container with R. You can stop it with S. You can pause it with P. You can do E to hide show stopped containers, and D. I don't have any stopped containers right now, but I would be able to show you that one. And then D is remove a container, so if you want to get rid of it. So this has all the commands, everything you need. It's really cool. And if you slash, you will filter your list down, so that's pretty cool. Left and right square brackets, like I said, tabs, you can move around between the tabs. And then W is open in the browser, which is like it's going to use the first port, HTTP. And then enter will focus the main panel. So again, kind of up to you what you're trying to get to. You've got new screen mode and previous screen mode. So pretty cool. They've got a lot of really cool shortcuts. I'm not going to remember all these, so we can always come back and look at it again. If we do escape, we get out of that, but we're in there. Let's just do execute the shell, which is capital E. So we're inside of the Vault Warden shell. I can do an ls. I can see all of the things that are in the Vault Warden shell. I can go move around. I can look at different stuff. I can kind of figure out what's happening, but you can see there's a file over here called Vault Warden. I know this is kind of small for the ones on the phone. I apologize, but if I do cd vault, it says it's not a directory. It's an application, I'm guessing, so we can't get into it. Let's go do cd var. We can do an ls. There's our var inside of the Vault Warden container. So we've got this really great place that we can check on things and see things. The one thing, let's see, go cd log and do an ls, and here's our var logs inside of the container. So for you guys that are used to looking at var log, here it is. It's actually not that hard to get in here. Now if I type exit, it's going to say press enter to go back to this, and we're there. So it's awesome. Now what I'm looking at is the logs tab. You can see there's other tabs here, so I'm going to use the square bracket that opens to the right, and that's going to move me to the right. And that puts us on the stats, so we can kind of see what's happening. I think, no, maybe I went to top. Let's go back to logs. There we go. There's stats. So stats gives us a graph of what's happening on our container. You can see CPU and memory usage, which is pretty cool. You've got some up and down traffic information down here as well. I can move again to the right. I'm using the square bracket that opens on the left side to move to the right. So think of the square bracket as kind of like an arrow, I guess. And then here we've got our env information, so all of the environment variables that are being used inside of the container, they're all right here. So if you're going, okay, I don't know what's happening, why is this not functioning the way I expect, you can see what's going on, and you can see some different information about this, which is pretty cool. So it shows my email address, plain text, Vault Warden. Yeah, I'm going to have to blur this out, but that's okay. 587. So here's all of my different information that I'm using for this container. The next one is our config. So how is this thing configured? So you can see here's the ID, here's the name, here's the image it's using, and you're going to get latest version. Here's the command that it uses to run it. Here's some labels, a whole bunch of labels that are going on in here. Here's our mount points. So here's my volume mapping essentially. Here's my port mapping if I'm wondering like what port am I using for this thing. Full details. Now if we want to get into this main section here, I think we can click, did it do it? Yeah, it'll let me scroll. And I can see this thing, so you can see it in JSON format, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to go to the top information, which gives us just what's happening here as far as what system parameters are we seeing. So we can go back to the logs and back to the stats. So really cool. Now over here, if I want to move around, I can hit tab and I jump down to this next section. You can see exactly what I'm looking at here. So up here we've got this config information again, and I can just roll through these things to see the different configs. And then down below that we've got volume information, so we can see our different volumes for the different applications, all the different information that we've got about those, what labels there are, if any, options, all that information that you'd be interested in seeing is right here. So very, very cool. And again, we can just jump up, and we can jump up, and we can just scroll through these things. Very, very awesome. And if we do a tab, you get information about LazyDocker itself. And if you click in here, you can of course scroll and see what's happening. So very, very easy to get this information and kind of see what's happening here. You can always click back over here and jump around. I don't think you can click on these. Oh, you can click on these things with the mouse too. Holy cow, look at that. Okay, just made it even more navigable, so you don't have to use keyboard bindings if you don't want to for a lot of this. You can actually just click for the mouse. I don't know if you can click on these. Oh, you can. You can even click on the tabs. I mean, come on, guys. So we've got hide, show, stopped containers. We've got pause, stop, restart, attach, view logs. We did exec shell, run predefined custom commands. So I want to view the logs. Let's go view the logs of one of these containers here. We'll escape to get out of that. All right, this one has some logs. Okay, so I see what's happening. It says view the logs. It's going to tail the logs. So as things happen, it's going to show you more logs. Okay, the one I tried before just didn't have any logs. If we do an enter, it doesn't get us out. So we're going to do a control C. There we go. And we're back over here to LazyDocker. Okay, let's look at the other options that we have here. View bulk commands. Very interesting. So things you can do to all of the containers at once, I'm sure. Open in a web browser and filter the list. Let's do a filter list and then we'll check out bulk commands after that. So let's go / and down here at the bottom it gave me a filter option here. And let's just filter this down to Q, and there we go. So we've got qBit, torrent, quant.ux. So pretty quickly it filters as you type, so very nice. That's very awesome. If we do an escape, we get back out of the filtering. And let's do a B. So here's all of our, so we can stop all containers, remove all containers, prune exited containers, and then we can of course cancel what's going on. There we go. Okay, very cool. So I mean, this is an awesome little application. This gives you a lot of control. This is kind of like Pertainer in the command line, except it's a little bit, to me, a little quicker, a little easier to see. I think Pertainer is a great tool. Don't misunderstand. But this gives you a really great overview of what's happening inside of your containers very quickly. And yeah, so just so much really great stuff here. Yeah, this is LazyDocker. This is awesome. And when I'm done with it, I'm sure I can just hit Control-C. Yes, and we're out. Very nice. That's a pretty awesome application. I hope you guys get something out of this. I hope that I've helped those of you who've had a hard time with Docker, struggling with Docker, understand better what Docker is about and how it gets built and what's going on, and that you can get in and see what's going on under the covers 100%. It is just something that you have to kind of learn where those things are at, and tools like LazyDocker make it so much easier. So I 100% appreciate the maintainers of LazyDocker. I appreciate all the people that are sponsoring it. I hope you guys will think about going out there and doing that as well, and just really get out there and try this. I think you're going to love something like Docker. It is such an incredible tool for making services available to people and really repeating that process. The great thing about it is when somebody makes a Docker container, they test it, and if they've tested it properly, they know that it's working. And when you go pull that new container, it's got everything inside of that container area that it needs to run. It's not dependent on you installing a whole bunch of extra stuff on your system other than Docker. Once you've done that, you should be able to run that container, and it should run just like it does for everybody else. It's a very repeatable process, which is what you're looking for when you're creating new software and you want people to be on the uptake of that software. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I've set up a store with a little bit of merchandise. I love being your open source advocate, but I want you guys to be the open source advocates with me. So if you want to, get out there and get some of this stuff. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the open source journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.